Yo, what is going on, guys? It's been a long time since I've done a review of much of anything these days. The world has been turned upside down, and then I moved, and then I just haven't gone to the theater in a long time, and it was just a lot of things going on. Crazy, crazy life, crazy, crazy world these days. But I'm back. I'm in full swing, and I'm here to bring you the review of, well, honestly, a show I did not expect and was really kind of like scratching my head, like, why do we need another one of these kind of shows? So, another superhero show, you know what I'm talking about, the Amazon Prime original, about a superhero who's, frankly, and so Invincible stars Stephen Yeun, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that right, J.K. Simmons, Sandra Oh, Zazie Beetz, and many more. A lot of good names in this movie. It is written by Robert Kirkman, which, if that sounds familiar to you, he wrote and directed The Walking Dead show as well. And yeah, and you can kind of see some similarities between this show and The Walking Dead for sure. Another show that they've been comparing this to is The Boys, if you've seen that. It's definitely up there in the superhero genre slash grittiness. This show does not pull any punches. It is definitely not for the faint of heart when it comes to violence. It is pretty up there. And it starts out very kind of warm and kind of comfortable. You get kind of like a DC vibe, without going into spoilers. You get kind of a DC vibe in the first like 15, 20 minutes. But by the end of that episode, you're like, what the heck is going on? and that was a good way to end the first episode. Now, granted, Robert Kirkman is known for kind of changing up the comics versus a show. You definitely know that if you've seen The Walking Dead. I have personally have not seen The Walking Dead, but I've just read reviews. I just know that it kind of trails off what it's supposed to be in the comics. But yes, Invincible does do that. There's a huge event that happens at the end of episode 1. I'm not going to say it, obviously, but put it this way, that event doesn't happen for a couple issues in the comics. So chronologically, the show is way different than the comics in terms of order, when characters are introduced, when certain characters do things. It's translated differently in a show, and I understand the show is different than comics. Comics come out weekly. Show, at least for Amazon, it was all at once. There are 8 episodes. They kind of have to like cram stuff in to kind of get to an overarching kind of point to the season. So just keep that in mind while you're watching this. And yeah, it's like I said, it is not for the faint of heart. It definitely gets gritty at times. I wouldn't say it's like overly grotesque though. It's not gritty because it wants to be. It's gritty because it needs to be. I will say the end of the first episode, probably the most gory of that the show gets. So if you want to maybe fast forward or kind of like close your eyes or whatever, if you're not into gore, that is the goriest part it gets to. It gets pretty brutal throughout the show, but it is definitely not as bad as episode 1. Just put that out there. Now, I said it's only gory and gritty because it needs to be, and that's because it's just the type of show it is. When you start establishing these characters, you start understanding kind of their motivations, start understanding what kind of world we're in, and people like to relate this to The Boys. Now with The Boys, it's more of like, superheroes are, they're corrupt and they're more political figures, and they're not like here to really save the world. Invincible, it's more so kind of like The Walking Dead. It's more so just realistic. If someone's getting punched and they're not just going flying, hitting a building, and then they're walking out and they're okay, like Superman. There is blood, there's bruises and a lot of just like crazy animation when it comes to violence. And honestly, that's probably why they went with animated instead of live action, because animated you can kind of go over the top and kind of do all these crazy kind of animation fight scenes and angles and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, that kind of leads me into my next thing. I cannot praise the show enough on the animation quality. Now, some people have kind of griped about it. I'm not really sure why. Maybe because it's a little on the stiffer side, and it's kind of a little bit choppy. In terms of, like, let's say Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse, the animated movie. Everything flows. It's very like liquid-ish, where in the terms of it just kind of flows and it's not very rigid. Now this show animation, it takes something I'm used to. I personally like it. I think it's more in terms of the comics. So if you read the comics and you see that animation style, it parallels, and it's a good time. I really enjoyed the animation. There are several scenes I can literally point out, but I won't because I don't want to spoil. I like to do spoiler-free reviews, but I can point out several scenes throughout the season of these 8 episodes that my mind was blown. I was like, holy crap, that animation was insanely good. And yeah, I'd have to commend that animation for sure on this one. Now, as far as the characters go, like I said, Steven Yeun, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that right. Let me know if I'm not. But he plays a teenage boy named Mark Grayson, who is kind of literally is a teenager and just got his powers. His dad is also a superhero, and he kind of finding his own identity, kind of like going through the motions of a normal teenager while also having superpowers. So you kind of get those like kind of high school teenage tropes. It reminded me a lot, at least the beginning of the show, very, very beginning, like the first episode, reminded me a lot of Sky High, if you see that Disney movie. Very just like kind of getting his powers, kind of using them just for day-to-day life, and then realizing it's a big responsibility to have powers and all that kind of stuff. Got some huge Spider-Man vibes. When it comes to, great power comes great responsibility, that whole kind of parallel. It really, really shines through in this show for sure. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of good characters. You could see a lot of big parallels in terms of just like characters kind of being spin-offs of big characters that we know. Like there's a character that literally acts and looks kind of like Batman. There's one that acts kind of like Wonder Woman. So it's very just like, it's supposed to be like that. It's supposed to be like, okay, this is this world's version of the Justice League or Avengers or whatever. And they do that on purpose because they want it to be like, oh, okay, this is kind of like happy-go-lucky superhero show. And I will say, and towards the middle of the season, I would say episode 4 or 5, it kind of gets a little sluggish, and there's a little like side kind of quest storyline that I'm personally wasn't a huge fan of. I know some people were like, oh, they should have done more with this character, and I'm not gonna spoil, but should have done more with this character because it gets really, really good later and all that kind of stuff. So I maybe they're just setting stuff up for future seasons. I know that this character does other things because I know about the comics a little bit. I haven't read all the way through the comics, but anyway, so stuff like that where it kind of just like veers off the main point of the show, which would be the end of episode 1. We're like, what the heck? How is this going to be solved? What's going to happen? What's this character going to do? We were wondering that throughout the whole entire season, and so they're kind of veering off towards the middle of the season to kind of like, okay, Mark has to do this, Mark has to do that, and he is in high school, so he's dealing with relationship problems, he's dealing with friend problems, and while also trying to save the world from villains and stuff, and kind of find his own identity in who he is, which is Invincible. So it's very, very interesting, but unfortunately I have to bump it down for that reason. I think it gets a little slow in the middle, but it's a ginormous payoff in the finale, the last episode. It is bonkers, and it goes crazy, and it's the first, like, I think it's only like the first 20 minutes, and the last like 15-20 minutes are just kind of just the repercussions of what happens in the finale. And I gotta say, there's a moment in the finale, you're gonna know what I'm talking about. And if you've watched it, you want to talk about it, leave a comment or something like that. But like, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's a moment I literally teared up, and I was like, wow, this show moved me, and I didn't think it would, because I thought it was just a superhero show that was trying to be gritty and trying to be like edgy. And I was just like, it's just entertaining. Like, I like the characters, I like the plot. It's interesting. But then they hit me with the kind of like the just the emotion bomb, I'm just like, oh, you didn't think the show was gonna be emotional? Bam, it's gonna get emotional. So really fun time with this show. I can't praise it enough. Like I said, the middle is a little bit sluggish, but other than that, it shines through. I cannot wait for season 2 and 3. It got renewed for 2 more seasons, which is great. There's a lot of content in the comics, so I'm hoping this show gets more seasons for years to come. But yes, Invincible, I give it a 7 out of 10 overall. Let me know what you thought of Invincible down in the comments. If you liked anything I had to say, please leave a like on this video, or either on Instagram or if you're on YouTube, or both. It really helps me out a lot. And yeah, guys, like I said, I got loads of reviews coming soon. I got Cruella, I got A Quiet Place Part 2, I got Black Widow coming next week. I'm so excited to be back and do these reviews with you guys. But yeah, I'll talk to you guys later.